what do you see as the key principles to engaging adjunct faculty in your union? And how do you make sure they have a voice in deciding on bargaining priorities? Annette, you're nodding. You got something you want to jump in on right away?
I'm okay. I'm okay going ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're going to talk about this more in another question. But to have a union structure that honors and includes adjunct faculty equally to the full-time faculty, that is so essential. And I'm lucky to be in a local where we have a long history of that. Our constitution and bylaws have positions for adjunct faculty, and I can hold any other position in our union if I want to try. We have an equal voice. Every once in a while there will be this, well, why do the adjuncts have a full vote? Because they're not paying full dues or whatever. Don't ever let that kind of talk go anywhere. Yeah, so anyway, equal voice, equal votes, equal chance to lead, and then just supporting one another in all of the things that we all need. I feel like I'm having a little brain fog moment here. So can you repeat the question for me and I'll get back on track?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And everyone has, it's Friday. It's Friday. It just said, what do you see the key principles to getting engaging adjunct faculty? And how do you make sure that your adjuncts on your campuses have a voice in deciding what your priorities are when it comes to bargaining?
Thank you. Yeah. So some other things are making sure that you have spaces on your bargaining teams for adjunct faculty. And we have made it a practice for a long time to have at least 2. It's a really lonely thing to be sent in all by yourself. And so it's really important to at least have 2. And oftentimes we've had 3 adjuncts on our bargaining teams. And when we have other activities going on, when we send out an invitation to get involved, that invitation goes to everyone. And we do consciously say, we need a variety of people on this particular team or on this particular group task force. And we make sure that we're looking for the adjunct faculty to join on to that. And then, let's see. I think just not excluding anybody, not saying, oh, we're only going to ask, this group this time. Our surveys go out to everyone, our votes include everyone. But a really key thing is to talk to the adjuncts, to do very intentional communications. We've started to do a big outreach right now after not being able to really do it for quite a long time. And we have lots and lots of adjunct faculty that we need to make contact with, and we're doing it. Our folks have lists and they know who to talk to. So it's going to take a lot of time, but it's worth it. If they don't have to join the union, but they need to know that we're here willing to listen and hoping that they'll get involved.
Great points, great points. Douglas?
Yeah, it's hard to say more, after Annette handled that so well. And I was thinking that as far as guiding principles, I was thinking, how is it that we get to a place where we're engaging adjuncts in the way that we need to be able to build power and that translates into real outcomes in negotiations and in general for workers, right? And for us, for faculty. And I think like guiding principles in a larger sense are about what it is that you value as a unit, what it is that what drives you in how it is you approach what it is that you do as leadership and as membership. And I think for us, one of the guiding principles that was really important was bargaining is about bringing in and fighting with the most vulnerable, and that our fates are tied together. And I think we often talk about this as fighting for people, but I don't think that approach translates into the same kind of engagement as fighting with and alongside. And I think when we chose to do bargaining the way that we did and approached it as an organizing strategy in a very forceful way, it opened up scenarios where adjuncts were organically organizing, and thanks to people like Kristen Joy and Kate, who were doing all this work at HCEA, with HCEA, but as adjunct organizers, thinking about how it is they needed to do what they needed to do to protect their own folks. And sorry, is that somebody? Me? I don't know, sort of beep. I think that was really significant for us. So that guiding principle about bringing in and fighting with the most vulnerable, that putting the most vulnerable members at the front of your strategy at all times is critical, because that translates to how it is that people perceive you in these ranks, that you're looking out for them, that what you struggle with is meaningful to the leadership, but also that you're creating space so that those folks can talk back to you and let you know where they're at and let you know if their needs are being met. And when you take the approach of fighting with rather than for, it creates that kind of space in a different way. And I think that's something that we did reasonably successfully in the last negotiations and organizing drives that we did, but we still have a long way to go. And again, a lot of this talk was about fighting for adjuncts. I think at a certain point, we looked at it as we're fighting against contingency. We're fighting against precarity. We're fighting against these abuses, period. And when you talk about it that way, you look at the abuses to adjuncts in an entirely different way. You also see them as part of a larger picture of abuse towards faculty. And Annette had already mentioned some of the things that, full-time faculty are doing. They often, yeah, sure, they get paid more, but they're often absolutely overburdened with a ridiculous amount of work, where they just can't find any work-life balance. There's all kinds of emotional, psychological stuff that's happening, mental health issues that are happening across the board. So when you look at this as a fight against contingency, these divisions, they don't evaporate, but they get imagined in a different kind of way and move towards a direction of solidarity. And fighting with and looking at this as a fight against contingency, period, starts to kind of link your struggles together in a way that other approaches about like fighting for people don't necessarily allow for. So I think that was a huge benefit to us in our organizing that was going on. And I think the other thing is bargaining for your local is a local thing. It's right, we're locals. But when you have the mindset going in there that you're not just bargaining for your local, you're bargaining with other locals. You're bargaining with other workers and for other workers. You're basically fighting for people to be valued and their work to be valued and for some dignity. And I think when you go in with that mindset and you organize with that guiding principle, a larger meta guiding principle, the kind of possibilities that open up in terms of strategy and organizing shift, right? You start to see a different sense of responsibility when you're at the table. You start to see pictures in a more comprehensive way. I think that was a really important part of us was, yes, we got to engage adjuncts more, but how is it that we imagine these situations where engagement is a process that happens together? And that was a really tricky thing. And I think we made some progress in that area. And like I said, we have a long way to go. But I also would say another guiding principle is imagining bargaining always about building trust. Even if you have some trust, you have to continue to build it. And one of the hardest things for like a lot of union leadership is to deal with criticism, because we often get in there, we're like, oh, we're working our asses off, we're doing all this stuff. And sometimes people get frustrated because of what they're experiencing. And then they say stuff, like, what are you guys doing in there? Are you getting anything done? And the first response is to be like, hey, do you have any idea how much unpaid work I do here as a volunteer? Like, do you have any idea? But at the same time, remembering where that criticism comes from is somewhere real. There's something happening that could be better. And instead of being defensive about those things and asking the question, where is this coming from though? Are there things that we could do better? Are there communication strategies that we can improve? I know Annette touched on communication. Are there ways that we can relate to adjuncts that are more productive? What are the reasons why this mistrust exists in the first place? How much of this can we really take on ourselves and be introspective in a healthy way that's going to build solidarity and build power so we can be more successful at the bargaining table. So those are like those really big overarching principles that came to mind. And the other one was moving from labor consciousness to class consciousness. I thought was a really important thing. You know, and I think a lot of us were like, we know how to fight for our union or our local, and we love unions. But there's even a bigger picture than that. Like, how does our union fit in overall with making standards of living better, with improving people's lives better, with dealing with class warfare as it manifests in our jobs as educators and union activists. So I think, and member activists. So I think that was a really important thing. And when we're organizing well, that stuff starts to emerge and people start to link themselves to larger struggles, both, you know, within education and this kind of work, but also past that, you know, in the larger world. So I think bargaining locally with a global mindset is a really important part of strategizing too, as to how to engage.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. That was fantastic.